Hi friends, thank you so much for joining me today for another video. So today's gonna be another kind of tag video. It's been a while since I've done a tag video. I don't remember the last time I did a tag video, but can you guys count how many times I've said tag video? Anyway, I'm kind of late in the game, but basically May was Asian American Heritage Month, and I actually just kind of lived through May without even having realized it. That was kind of how crazy May was, but I am excited to do this Asian American tag that I've been seeing on YouTube, and I figured I can't miss the chance to do an Ooh! Sorry you guys, I got too excited. Anyways, I can't miss the chance to do an Asian American tag, so I figured why not just do it? Better late than never. So here it is. Everyone has really unique and interesting experiences, even though we all are kind of like the same culture, I guess. We're classified in the same culture of like Asian American culture, but we all have such different experiences. So I was really excited just to kind of bring my experience to you guys, just being an Asian American. So I hope you guys enjoy it, and let's just dive right into the questions. I am half Korean and half Japanese. My biological mother is Japanese and my father is Korean. So that makes me half and half of countries that have had a history of not particularly liking each other, and I've had a lot of questions growing up being like, how did you happen? Or like, what went wrong? Or just kind of ridiculous questions that obviously I cannot answer. But yeah, it's kind of a strange combination, and I don't see a lot of us half Korean, half Japanese people out there, but when I do, I get so excited. My generation, I think it's a little bit confusing because I don't know if I classify as like explicitly second gen or even first gen. I was born here in the States. I was born in Tennessee, so that would classify me, I guess, as a second gen, I think. Unless you classify generations as like the first generation to be born here, but I think the classification is outlined as the first generation to live in the country is first gen. So that would mean that I am second gen, but I am a little bit different because I have lived abroad in Korea and Japan for years, like early years of my life, which I would think would classify me kind of as like almost a second gen, but not quite, like maybe like 1.7 gen. I mean, that doesn't really make sense, but it makes sense in my head. Now, this is tricky for me. I don't think I have like the typical experience where like you bring like your ethnic food to school and your friends kind of make fun of you for how smelly or yucky your food looks or smells, or like being teased for being, you know, Asian. I'm not even sure if I felt like that whole demarcation experience in the first place, because I did come from Korea when I started to live in the US long term. So at the age of 9 is when I moved to the US after having lived with my grandparents for a while. So I was born here in the States, but I lived abroad in Korea and Japan for early years of my life. Then I came back to the States at the age of 9. So because of that, I already knew coming in to the States that I was different. I mean, I barely even spoke English at the time, so I knew that I was, you know, very obviously Asian, very Korean. I mean, that's kind of the culture that I closely identified with at the time because I had just come from Korea. So I just felt like I was very just different. Like I liked different foods. I hated Cheez-Its, like they're just too salty and kind of like lacking in depth of flavor. I thought the same thing about like Teddy Grahams and like Goldfish, and I was like, why are all the foods here so bland? Because in Korea, like if you know anything about Korean food, it's all about like richness and depth and flavor, and like the complexity of flavor is what really like makes Korean food stand out. And so when I came here in the States, I was like, what is up with all these like bland and salty foods? So I just clearly felt that like culture shock when I came here, even though I was born here in the States, right? So because of that, I felt like I didn't quite have like that experience where I was like, oh wow, like I didn't know I was different, but these kids are making me like really realize that I'm different. You know, I didn't really feel that. I just knew that I was different coming in from the start. So I guess my experience is a little bit different in that sense. I want to say that I was always proud of my heritage, but if I were to really examine like the early years of my childhood, like elementary school years, or even middle school or high school years, I would say that I didn't quite retain that pride in my Korean or Japanese culture. I'd say that I kind of wanted to be whitewashed. I wanted to be so American that like people wouldn't even see the fact that I'm Asian. I wonder if it's because I was raised by my aunt, and she was born in Korea, but she lived the majority of her life here in the States. So she is very much an American. Because I was raised by her, I feel like I didn't really have like that huge gap in immigrant parent raising me, you know, who is Asian American. I felt like I was raised by an Asian American. So because of that, I never really had like an experience where I'm like, oh my gosh, you're embarrassing me. Like, I don't like my culture. This is embarrassing. Like, this is shameful or anything like that. I didn't have any experiences like that whatsoever. It was more so like I just wanted to make myself blend in so much that rather than just like actively rejecting my culture, it was kind of like a gradual thing that just happened inevitably with the process of me trying to blend in. So I don't know if that makes sense to you guys, but I would say, yeah, that I didn't like actively reject my culture. The emphasis was more on me trying to blend in with American culture and really trying to adapt American culture over like my Korean or Japanese culture. That definitely changed a little bit as I went into high school. I got more into like Taiwanese dramas or Japanese or Korean dramas and K-pop and J-pop and J-rock and all that jazz. So as I went into high school, I started to embrace like the little more like Asian pop culture, but I wouldn't say that I was like fully embracing my culture until probably like college. College is when I fully wanted to embrace my culture, and that's just gotten stronger since. So right now I'm like really gung-ho about embracing my cultures. So there it is. Really long answer. I think some stereotypes that I personally struggle with is kind of silly, but I think it's the fact that like I'm an engineer, and because I'm an engineer and I'm Asian American, I'm kind of like living up to the stereotype. Growing up, I was never good at math. Like, math was my weak subject. I never understood it. I was always bad at it. But then for some reason, going into college, I turned out to be really good in like calculus and like understanding complex calculus, and I was like, where's this coming from? But that basically like really helped in my undergraduate career in engineering, and I guess like one thing led to another and I became a mechanical engineer. I feel like as an Asian, I kind of hate the fact that I'm sort of living up to this stereotype. Like, people are asking me like, oh, you must be good at math. I can't say like, no, like you can't assume that just because I'm Asian I'm good at math. I'm just like, well, I enjoy it, you know, like I don't know, it's kind of tricky. Like, I take pride and joy in the fact that our people are known for being very smart and hardworking and brilliant, but at the same time, when you're just kind of flatly categorized as smart or nerdy or good at math or an engineer. I think it takes away the uniqueness and the beauty of our individuality, and I think that is what bugs me about just stereotypes in general. But I think that would be like the biggest thing. I don't know if that's an answer that makes sense, but that's the best I can come up with. So I did grow up bilingual, if you can call it that, I guess. I grew up speaking Japanese and English because at the time when I was like, I don't know, anywhere from the age 1 through 5 or something, my dad didn't know how to speak Japanese, and my biological mom spoke Japanese, and we were living in Japan. So because of that, I was speaking Japanese with my friends, with my biological mom, with obviously like my younger sister, and like everyone around me except my dad. And with my dad, I spoke English, and I feel like I didn't really learn too much English from that experience. I'd say I learned like broken English, so I'm not sure if that really classifies as bilingual, but I did learn 2 languages at the same time, so I guess that's bilingual. And then when I moved to Korea after my parents got divorced, I ended up learning Korean, and that completely somehow pushed Japanese out of my brain, so I ended up being fluent in Korean and still spoke a little bit of broken English. And then when I moved to the States, I became fluent in English and then not so great in Korean, and obviously Japanese was still just not in the picture. Then I went to college and I took Japanese. I think I took like 4 semesters of it, and because of that I am now at a state where I can speak conversational Japanese. I speak better Korean than Japanese, but yeah, I still speak like conversational Korean, and obviously English is the most comfortable language for me. Again, this is kind of a question that is a little bit unique, I think, as far as Asian American experiences go. I mean, everyone has really different experiences, but I didn't really have like a huge generational cultural gap with my parents because obviously I was raised by my aunt, who is very much Asian American, so we kind of had like a very similar culture. And my dad, he kind of grew up in the States a little bit, starting like middle school, I think, and then ever since then he's been pretty much like Asian, Japanese, Korean American. So I mean, that's how I view him anyway. So he doesn't really seem like flat out Asian, so because of that, I don't really have that kind of like a cultural difference that a lot of, I guess, Asian Americans have with their parents, like their immigrant parents. Or I mean, if you're 2nd gen, it's your immigrant parents, but if you're 3rd gen, you might relate to my experience. I feel like my relationship with my grandparents is pretty similar to how like a lot of immigrant parents and their children interact. Like obviously my grandparents are very, very Korean, so we have like a big cultural difference right here. I'm Asian American and they're Korean. I mean, Korean, Japanese American, and then Korean. That would make more sense. So because of that, there is definitely a difference, but because I have lived in Korea for 3 years, I think I have like a better understanding of their culture. I am able to not have as many conflicts because I'm able to be a little more understanding. I don't even have like a language barrier so much. I have a little bit of a language barrier because my Korean's not like that great, but I think it's more so like generational and cultural difference that causes conflict. They're from the war era, so there's definitely a difference in the way we think about society and about the roles of men and women. So I guess that would be like the biggest source of something affecting our relationship, is that difference in generational plus cultural difference. Now, I would say that first and foremost, I identify, I think, the most with American culture, and then with Korean culture, and then with Japanese culture. So I think that would be the order of which I would identify with my cultures. Obviously, because I'm Asian American, I'm not like fully like American, and I'm not like fully Japanese or Korean, right? I'm somewhere in the middle, so I just kind of take like bits and pieces of each culture that I can really like identify with and I can really roll with. So I'm really into the idea of like celebrating Korean holidays like Chuseok, which is like Thanksgiving almost, and then Seoll날, which is like the Korean or Japanese or Chinese New Year, and just like doing traditional things like making tteokguk or making songpyeon, like different types of Korean dishes during different holidays. I've come to embrace it a lot more, and I feel like I identify with it a lot more because I don't want to lose my identity in that culture. I've been trying a lot harder, I think, in the last couple of years to just kind of learn a little bit more about, you know, the traditions in Korean culture. As for Japanese culture, I don't identify with it as much, kind of hardly, because I just don't really have like experience growing up in like traditional Japanese culture like for years, you know, like where I could comprehend what was going on. A lot of the traditional things that I did as a little girl was also rooted in like kind of religious things that kind of clashes with my current religion. You know, being Christian, I don't want to do things that are, you know, not Christian. You know what I mean? So because of that, it's kind of tricky to like navigate different traditions while also upholding my beliefs and not compromising anything. But I will say I'm very proud to be Korean, Japanese, American. I really like different aspects of both countries. I have had instances where I kind of flip-flop back and forth, like, oh, you know, I really like this about Japanese culture better than the Korean culture, or I really actually like this about Korean culture more so than the Japanese culture. So like I kind of flip-flop back and forth, kind of not knowing where to stand. But I think I'm at a place where I'm just like, you know what, each culture is very different, has a lot of pros and cons, but I enjoy being, you know, from 2 different cultures, or I guess now 3 different cultures. Like I really do enjoy it. So I think it's like a beautiful thing, though it could be viewed as like not so great of a thing. I think it's really awesome that like Asian Americans don't really fit in either Asian culture or American culture. Growing up, it could feel a little bit alienating because you may feel like neither culture accepts you. For Korean or Japanese cultures, usually if you're Asian American, they're like, oh, you're American, like you don't really fit into our culture. I felt that more so with Japanese culture than like Korean culture, though. Once you make friends with Koreans, they're like, oh, you're Korean. Like even though I'm like half Japanese, they'd be like, oh, you're not Japanese, like you're totally Korean. And I would kind of have an issue with that. But I think overall it's really awesome that we get to kind of pick and choose what we define our culture to be. We get to pick and choose all the great aspects of all the different cultures and just kind of make it our own. And we have our own Asian American culture, and I think that's so wonderful, and I love that. And I think that's probably one of my favorite things about being Asian American. So I really like just being unique, and I honestly think that I wouldn't trade it for anything else. My experiences are what kind of molded me to the person that I am today. I am really grateful to be Asian American. That's pretty much it for the Asian American tag and like my Asian American experience. I could honestly talk on and on and on about it if you can't tell, but I'm gonna try to keep it shorter if I can help it. So with that said, thank you guys again so much for watching and just spending this time with me to hear me talk about my experience. I certainly think that it's a valuable thing for every one of us to be a little more educated about each other's cultures and learn and understand each other better. So with that said, that brings us to the end of the video, and I love you guys so much. Thank you guys so much for supporting me and being amazing. And with that, I'll hopefully see you in my next one. Bye!